It was 9 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday when the email came. I saw it happen in slow motion. My email client hummed, and then the message appeared. It was not meant for me. It was sent from Donald Henderson, the founder of Helix Systems, and addressed to Sarah in Human Resources. But in his rush, Donald had accidentally clicked the group email address for the entire development team. The message was short, brutal, and clear. It read, Clara Santos's billing rate to our clients will remain at $300 an hour, but keep her pay at $12 an hour through the fourth quarter. She does not have the leverage to negotiate. Single mom, community college background, classic hungry immigrant kid syndrome. She will accept whatever we offer. My fingers froze over my keyboard, my throat closed up, and the blood rushed to my ears. For 3 seconds, nobody in the bullpen breathed. Then came the frantic recall attempt from Donald's office, followed by the sound of his heavy oak door slamming shut. But it was too late. The damage was done. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there staring at my screen, the 26 lines of code I was debugging blurring into a single streak of blue. My name is Clara Santos. I was 31 years old, and I had spent the last 9 months rebuilding the entire client portal for Helix Systems from scratch while living on instant soup and desperate hope. Before I go on, if you are reading this, please drop a comment letting me know where you are from and subscribe. This is my story, and it has been my therapy. I came to Helix Systems with big dreams and even bigger student loans. My daughter Maya was 4 years old then. She had severe asthma, which meant that my insurance requirements were absolutely non-negotiable. My ex-husband had vanished to South America, leaving nothing but unpaid bills and random child support. When I interviewed, Donald Henderson leaned back in his massive leather chair and said they were taking a chance on me. He offered $12 an hour, promising a salary review in 6 months. We are a family here, he said, promising that they invested in people who invested in them. I believed him because Maya's medicine cost $1,400 a month, and our rent had just increased. They put me at a corner desk next to the noisy bathroom. My computer was 7 years old, and my training was just a stack of outdated manuals. But I worked. I stayed late, learning their glitchy systems and rebuilding database components nobody else wanted to touch. Within 3 months, clients specifically requested my help, praising how clearly I explained complex systems. I did not know then that Helix billed them $300 an hour for my time, while I still earned $12, struggling to buy groceries after paying for Maya's inhalers. The 6-month review never happened. When I asked about it, Donald did not even look up from his phone. We are tightening our belts right now, Clara, he said. Maybe next quarter. That afternoon, I overheard him booking a yacht for his 3rd vacation of the year. I started eating lunch in my car, unable to watch executives order expensive sushi while I rationed my daughter's food. In July, the bullpen air conditioning broke. Sweat ran down my face as I debugged a critical crash under a sudden deadline. Donald walked in around 11 in the morning, fresh from a round of golf. How is that Summit Enterprises project coming? He asked. They are our biggest account. We cannot afford mistakes. I told him it was almost complete. He checked his new gold watch. Good. They are paying premium rates for this rush job. I asked him what they charged for the rush work. He answered casually that the corporate rate was $360 an hour. $360 an hour for my labor, while I was paid $12. That night, after tucking Maya into bed in our 1-bedroom apartment, I opened my personal laptop. I sat at my kitchen table and started to plan. I drew diagrams, analyzed Helix's pricing models, and documented every system flaw. Every night, from 9 at night until 3 in the morning, I built Vesper, an alternative client portal that was elegant and fast. I registered my own company, Aura Technologies. During the day, I kept my head down. I smiled when Donald complained about costs while wearing designer suits. I nodded when HR postponed reviews due to the economy. The same week, they remodeled the executive restrooms. I worked harder than ever because every line of code I wrote for them was a lesson in what to improve in Vesper. I was no longer their victim. I was their competitor, building a company from a kitchen table while raising a child and working 40 hours a week is a special kind of exhausting. For the first 2 months, it was just me. I would write code until my eyes burned, then wake up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast for Maya and walk her to preschool. But by the third month, I realized I could not do it alone. I needed someone to make the interface match the power of the backend. I reached out to my neighbor Julia. She was a brilliant graphic designer who had recently been let go from her agency because they wanted to hire cheaper interns. She understood what it felt like to be treated as disposable. We sat at my kitchen table, drinking cheap supermarket coffee while Maya slept in the next room. Julia took my clunky layouts and transformed them into something beautiful. She designed an interface for Vesper that was clean, modern, and incredibly easy to use. We worked in perfect sync. While she polished the visual elements, I optimized the database queries and strengthened the security protocols. We were building a product that was not just a copy of Helix Systems software, but something vastly superior. By the fourth month, we had a working prototype of Vesper. It was fast, stable, and handled complex data migrations in seconds compared to the minutes it took on Helix's platform. By the fifth month, I took a leap of faith and applied for a small business loan. I prepared a detailed business plan, outlining the market opportunity and our technical advantages. To my surprise, the bank approved a loan of $25,000. The loan officer was impressed by our prototype, calling it the most promising bootstrap software project he had seen in years. I used a portion of that money to consult with an experienced labor lawyer. I handed him my Helix Systems employment contract, terrified that they would have legal grounds to claim ownership of Vesper. He spent 3 days reviewing the documents. When he called me back, his voice was reassuring. Helix Systems had been so lazy and cheap that they had used an outdated, generic contract template. It lacked a non-compete clause, and there was no language assigning intellectual property rights for work done outside of office hours using personal equipment. "You are completely clear," the lawyer told me. "They have absolutely no legal claim on what you have built on your own time." At my day job, the atmosphere was growing more toxic by the day. Donald hired his nephew as a technology consultant. The young man was paid $85 an hour, despite not knowing the basic difference between database languages. He spent his days watching videos and asking the junior developers to do his tasks. Meanwhile, I finally scheduled a meeting with Donald to ask for a $2 raise. I was still making $12 an hour, and the cost of Maya's asthma medication had risen again. Donald did not even let me finish my request. He launched into a patronizing lecture about the realities of business, the need to pay my dues, and how I should be grateful to have a stable job in a difficult economy. I sat there, keeping my face completely neutral as he spoke, but his words only hardened my resolve. I knew exactly what my labor was worth, and I knew how much he was profiting from it. The turning point came during a critical meeting with Summit Enterprises, Helix Systems' largest and most profitable client. They represented a massive portion of our annual revenue. Their chief executive officer, Eleanor Thorne, was a brilliant and demanding woman who had no patience for corporate fluff. Donald had insisted on presenting a new software demonstration that his nephew had supposedly prepared. 5 minutes into the meeting, the system crashed spectacularly, showing a screen of garbled errors. Donald panicked, sweating through his custom shirt while his nephew stared blankly at the screen. The client was furious, and Eleanor looked ready to walk out. In desperation, Donald called me into the conference room. I did not hesitate. I sat at the keyboard, located the memory leak in the nephew's code, and patched it in real time. As the system came back online, I began to explain the features in a calm, confident voice, guiding them through the data structure. I did not look at Donald once. I focused entirely on Eleanor, answering her complex questions with precise technical details. When the demonstration was over, Eleanor Thorne did not look at Donald or the lead developers. She looked directly at me. She asked who had built the underlying database. Before Donald could take credit, I answered clearly that I had rebuilt the entire system from scratch. Eleanor nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. As she gathered her papers to leave, she walked over to my desk. She did not hand me a corporate card. Instead, she wrote her private phone number on the back of a personal card and handed it to me. "Call me directly, Clara," she said, loud enough for Donald to hear. "We need to talk about your work." Donald's face turned a dark shade of red, but he did not dare say a word in front of his biggest client. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with the card in my hand, my heart racing as I dialed the number. When Eleanor Thorne answered the phone, she did not waste time with polite small talk. She told me she had been watching me solve complex database problems in real time for over an hour, and that my technical skills were far beyond anyone else at Helix Systems. She wanted to know my background and how I had ended up working there. I told her the truth. I explained my community college education, my role as a single mother, and my passion for building elegant software solutions. Then she asked me a direct question about my compensation. I hesitated, knowing the corporate rules about discussing salaries, but I decided I had nothing left to lose. I told her I was being paid $12 an hour. The silence on the other end of the line was so long that I thought the call had disconnected. Then, Eleanor spoke, her voice quiet but filled with cold anger. $12, she repeated, and Helix Systems bills us $300 an hour for your services. I see. She thanked me for my honesty and told me to keep in touch. 2 days later, Donald called me into his office. He looked shaken, his usual arrogant posture replaced by a tense, nervous energy. He told me that Summit Enterprises had requested that I be the sole point of contact for their account going forward. He demanded to know what I had said to Eleanor Thorne during the demonstration. I looked him dead in the eye and told him I had only answered her technical questions about the database. He studied me for a long moment, trying to find a reason to fire me, but he knew he could not risk offending his largest client. For the next 3 weeks, I worked directly with Summit Enterprises. I attended video conferences that Donald was pointedly excluded from, and Eleanor's team treated my recommendations with genuine respect. Meanwhile, Vesper was finally complete. Julie and I had built a platform that was faster, more secure, and infinitely more user-friendly than Helix's clunky software. We had secured a tiny office space above a neighborhood coffee shop, rented at a discount from another mother at Maya's school. I had also hired 2 talented female developers who had been similarly underpaid and ignored at their previous jobs. We worked late into the night, fueled by cheap snacks and the shared dream of building a company where talent was actually respected. The infrastructure was ready, the database models were verified, and we had our first working deployment environment. It was time to take the final step. On a Monday morning, I walked into Donald's office and placed my written resignation letter on his desk. He was in the middle of booking a lunch reservation at an exclusive downtown restaurant, and he did not even look at the paper at first. When he finally noticed it, he laughed. He leaned back in his leather chair, looking at me with a mixture of amusement and pity. "Let me guess," he said. "Summit Enterprises offered you a job. They are always trying to poach talent. Look, Clara, we might be able to increase your pay to $14 an hour, but you have to be realistic about your prospects." I stood tall and interrupted him. "I am not going to Summit Enterprises," I said. "I have started my own technology company." Donald stared at me, and then he burst into a loud, mocking laugh that echoed down the hallway. "Your own company," he gasped. "Clara, be serious. Do you have any idea how much capital it takes to run a software business? You do not have the background or the resources." I told him quietly that I had secured independent funding and that my last day would be the 15th of the month. The laughter stopped instantly. Donald's face darkened, and he began to calculate the financial impact of my departure. He tried to convince me to stay, offering a temporary leave of absence and warning me about the risks of starting a business as a single parent without a partner. His condescension only made me feel more certain of my path. I thanked him for the opportunity and walked out of his office. That afternoon, Donald called an emergency executive meeting. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see him gesturing wildly and pointing toward my desk. Over the next few days, the tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Donald ordered his nephew to follow me, hoping to extract as much information as possible about my database structures before I left. The nephew spent most of his time looking at his phone, asking basic questions that showed he did not understand even the fundamentals of the system. 1 week into my notice period, I received a text message from Eleanor Thorne. She asked me to meet her for lunch at her private office the next day. I agreed immediately. The next morning, I told Donald I had a routine medical appointment for Maya. He looked suspicious but could not legally deny me the time off. I took an Uber to Summit Enterprises headquarters, a beautiful glass skyscraper that made Helix's offices look like a dusty warehouse. Eleanor met me in the lobby and led me to her office on the top floor, which offered a panoramic view of the city. As we sat down, she told me that Donald had called her the previous day, warning her that hiring me would be considered a hostile business action that could ruin their partnership. He had even offered Summit a 15% discount on their contract if they signed a 3-year renewal. Eleanor looked at me with a sharp smile. I told him I would consider it, she said. But now, Clara, I want to see this platform you have been building. I opened my laptop and loaded the Vesper demonstration. For the next 30 minutes, I walked Eleanor Thorne through every feature of the platform. I showed her how the automated data pipeline functioned, how Julia's interface simplified complex administrative tasks, and how our security measures prevented the vulnerabilities that had plagued Helix systems for years. In Helix's system, client data was exposed to basic security vulnerabilities, something I had warned Donald about twice, only to be told it was not in the budget to fix. In Vesper, I had built a custom sanitization layer that isolated every query. I demonstrated how a task that took 20 minutes on Helix's platform could be completed in 3 clicks on Vesper. Eleanor watched in complete silence, her eyes fixed on the screen, tracking the flow of data. When I finished, she did not say a word for what felt like an eternity. She leaned back, looking at me with respect. Then she asked how quickly we could deploy Vesper for Summit Enterprises. My heart hammered. I told her we had the server infrastructure ready, but we would need 2 weeks to migrate their massive database and customize their reporting modules to ensure a seamless transition. Eleanor agreed immediately, offering us a contract that was 30% cheaper than what Helix Systems charged them, yet would still provide my startup with a healthy profit margin, allowing me to pay my developers fair salaries and invest in our infrastructure. We shook hands and a wave of relief washed over me. But Eleanor warned me that Summit represented 40% of Helix's revenue. He will try to destroy you, Clara, she said. He has deep pockets and will use every legal resource to crush your company. I told her I had raised a sick child on $12 an hour and was prepared to fight. When I returned to Helix that afternoon, Donald was waiting by my desk, arms crossed, tapping his foot impatiently. The bullpen was silent. He accused me of lying about the medical appointment, claiming he knew I was meeting clients. I ignored his accusations, sat down, and logged into my computer. Donald leaned close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Just remember, anything you developed while working here belongs to Helix Systems, he said. You signed an agreement when you walked in the door. I will not let a community college dropout steal my intellectual property to build some backyard business. I looked him in the eyes and told him quietly that I had graduated summa cum laude, a detail he would know if he had ever read my employment file. His face tightened, realizing he could not intimidate me anymore. That night, I did not sleep. I worked with Julia and our 2 developers to finalize the Summit contract, establish our cloud hosting environments, and map out the data migration plan. I also backed up every single email, personal document, and code repository that proved Vesper had been built entirely on my own time using my own personal computer, storing duplicates on a secure, encrypted server. The next morning, I arrived at Helix Systems to find a scene of total chaos. Security guards were standing at the entrance, checking badges and looking through bags. Inside, senior developers were being escorted out of the building with their personal items stuffed into cardboard boxes. The atmosphere was thick with panic and confusion. I learned from Sarah in Human Resources that Donald was executing a mass layoff to restructure the company. He laid off 10 senior developers in a single morning, entirely violating the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, which required companies with over 100 employees to provide 60 days of advance notice for mass layoffs. Donald was trying to purge anyone he suspected of being loyal to me, creating an environment of fear and intimidation to prevent any collective action. At 2 in the afternoon, Donald scheduled a mandatory team meeting in the main conference room. Just before the meeting began, my cell phone rang. It was the school nurse from Maya's school. She told me Maya had suffered a severe asthma attack during recess, and though they had administered her emergency inhaler, she was still struggling and needed her mother immediately. My heart stopped. I panicked, grabbed my laptop bag, and ran toward the exit, ignoring the looks from the remaining staff. Donald blocked my path near the elevator, flanked by his head of security. He demanded to know where I was going, shouting that we were in the middle of a company transition and that leaving now was a breach of my duties. I told him my daughter could not breathe and that I was going to the school. He sneered, telling me that if I walked out that door, I was done and that I should not bother coming back. I looked at him, seeing only a desperate, fearful, and incredibly small man, and told him to move out of my way before I called the police. Something in my voice must have terrified him, because he stepped aside. I rushed to the school, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I found Maya sitting in the nurse's office, her breathing stabilized but her small face still pale and frightened. As I held her close, the nurse mentioned she had tried calling my work number first to get authorization, but the receptionist had told her I was no longer employed there. Donald had fired me the very moment I walked out the door. I took Maya home, tucked her into bed, and immediately called Eleanor and my legal counsel. We did not need to wait until the 15th. It was time to launch Vesper. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of intense labor. My small team worked through the night, writing custom scripts to migrate Summit Enterprises' massive database to Vesper. We checked every record, verified every security key, and stayed awake on pure adrenaline and grocery store coffee. By the second morning, the transition was complete. Summit Enterprises was officially running on our platform without a single minute of system downtime, their employees finding the interface so simple that we received 0 support tickets. The very next day, I received a call from Julian Price, a managing partner at Oak Ridge Capital, one of the most prominent venture capital firms in the region. He told me Eleanor Thorne had recommended Vesper, and they were interested in discussing an investment. We scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. When I arrived at their downtown offices, I was surprised to find Eleanor there, along with representatives from 3 other major Helix Systems clients who were tired of their buggy systems. I presented Vesper, demonstrating how it solved the security and speed issues they had complained about for years. Julian asked deep technical questions about our scalability, which I answered with ease. By the end of the presentation, 2 more clients had agreed to migrate to our platform. Julian offered us excellent investment terms that allowed us to secure a permanent, spacious office space and hire more staff immediately, giving us the resources to handle our rapid growth while backing us against any legal threats. But Donald was not going to let us succeed without a fight. The following morning, my lawyer called to inform me that Helix Systems had filed a lawsuit against Aura Technologies. They were alleging theft of trade secrets, breach of contract, and tortious interference with business relationships. Donald was also calling every venture capital firm in the city, claiming I was a disgruntled thief who had stolen Helix's proprietary technology. My lawyer reassured me. He had already prepared our defense, using the detailed logs and code repositories that proved Vesper was built independently. We also filed a massive countersuit against Helix Systems. We sued them for violating the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act by laying off 10 developers without notice, for wage theft under the Fair Labor Standards Act due to unpaid overtime, and for defamation regarding Donald's false statements to our investors. When Donald's lawyers read our countersuit, they realized they were in serious trouble. The evidence of their labor violations was undeniable, and Donald's phone calls to our investors constituted clear, documentable defamation that carried massive financial penalties. The turning point came when a major tech publication ran an article about our battle. The headline read, "Underpaid developer builds better system at night, takes clients when employer refuses raise." The journalist had obtained a copy of Donald's accidental email about my immigrant kid syndrome, and the story went viral across the industry. The public backlash against Helix Systems was swift and devastating. Hundreds of software developers began sharing their own stories of corporate exploitation under the hashtag of underpaid workers. Helix's board of directors panicked as their stock price began to plummet and clients threatened to cancel their contracts. Within a week, the board voted to suspend Donald Henderson indefinitely, pending an internal investigation into his business practices, and replaced him with an interim chief executive officer. 2 days later, Helix's legal team contacted my lawyer with an offer to settle the lawsuit. They agreed to drop all claims against Aura Technologies, issue a public apology, and pay us substantial damages for defamation. I agreed to the settlement, but on one strict condition. I demanded that Helix Systems hire an independent firm to audit their employee compensation, correct all wage disparities, and provide immediate back pay to every underpaid worker. I also demanded they implement transparent salary scales and eliminate all policies that forbade employees from discussing their pay. The board accepted our terms. They knew they had no legal defense and could not afford any more negative publicity. 6 months later, Aura Technologies had grown to 30 employees, operating out of a spacious, sunlit office with a daycare center on the first floor where Maya spent her afternoons playing happily. We had migrated dozens of clients from Helix Systems, and Vesper was widely recognized as the industry standard for client portals. Donald Henderson had resigned from Helix in disgrace, his reputation in the technology sector permanently ruined, making it impossible for him to secure another executive role. Helix Systems survived under new leadership, which implemented the transparent compensation policies and fair treatment standards we fought to establish. Sometimes I think about Donald's email, where he wrote that I had no leverage. He was wrong. My leverage was my skill, my determination, and my refusal to let someone else define my worth. If you are being undervalued at your job, remember that you have the power to change your story. Building something excellent is the ultimate response to those who underestimate you, showing them that your value was never theirs to decide.